Let's be real. How many times have you been told it's all of your hormones or all your gut or all your lab work? So you take the supplements, cut the gluten, run the tests, and still feel like garbage. But what if the real issue isn't in your blood work, but in your brain? If you've been stuck in chronic fatigue, autoimmune flare ups, or mystery symptoms no one can fix, this is the episode that might just change everything. Welcome to the Feel Better, Live Free podcast brought to you by Thinlicious. I'm your host, Ruth Sukup, and here we'll talk about everything from the science of weight loss to practical tips for making your health a priority in the midst of a busy life. It's a little bit nerdy, a little bit funny, and a little bit revolutionary. So buckle up, friend, because it's about to get real. Hey there, and welcome back to the Feel Better, Live Free podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ruth Sukup, and I am the founder of Thinlicious and the creator of the Thin Adapted System, as well as the New York Times bestselling author of 7 books. And today we are chatting with the incredible Mel Hopper Koppelman, program director at Synthesis Health Lab and an absolute powerhouse when it comes to helping people recover from chronic illness, even after everything else has failed. With over 15 years of clinical experience and 2 master's degrees in acupuncture and nutrition, Mel has developed a revolutionary approach that combines Chinese medicine, functional medicine, and developmental neurology. Her methods have helped thousands of patients dramatically reduce their symptoms from conditions like fibromyalgia, autoimmune disease, and chronic fatigue, not by adding more pills and protocols, but by finally addressing the root of it all, the nervous system. And if you've been feeling burned out, overwhelmed, or like you're stuck in survival mode, this conversation is probably going to resonate. I can't wait for you to hear what Mel has to say. So let's get right into it. Mel, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's just start with kind of the background. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and how you got to be doing what you are now.
Yeah, sure. So I practice, I call it integrative medicine. So I have a background in Chinese medicine and a background in nutrition and functional medicine. And increasingly in the last few years, I've been deep diving into the nervous system because it turns out that that's actually kind of important for health. I enjoy listening to your show. And as I've been listening to it, I've been thinking about a lot of the themes that you talk about the kind of incredible confusion that people have been given around nutrition and weight loss. And that actually, I have a pretty resonant story, kind of early childhood story around that, because my mom is a retired physician and a medical researcher. So I
Oh, wow.
remember in the 1980s, especially when this was being really kind of mainly implemented into our family, that we were not allowed to eat fat. We were not allowed to eat butter. We were only allowed to have margarine. We were not allowed to have steak. But also, I remember my mom struggling with her weight. And so I remember,
Mm.
she ate a lot of salads and a lot of healthy whole grains and, plastic margarine on everything. And then at a certain point, I remember her going to Watchers. And so I would kind of watch this thing unfold that she was, implementing the kind of the most cutting edge, best advice from the American Heart Association into our home. For me, I just remember always being hungry, not out of poverty at all. That's very fortunate, but out of being fed the
Lack of
opposite of what I
nutrition.
yeah, lack of
Yeah.
nutrition. I was on a high carb, low fat diet and I was starving. So when I think about your journey and what you talk about and educating people so they understand, I'm like, oh yeah, I've got some stuff around that.
Man, and doesn't that just make you so like it makes my heart hurt to hear that. Like here's your mom, right? As a mom, I think about that. Like you think you're doing the right thing for your family, you think you're being healthy. She's a physician. She's like listening to all the advice and here it's like actually the opposite. And is your mom still alive?
My mom is still alive. She's doing great.
She
And
does she still buy into that stuff?
No, she eats better now. In fact,
Oh, good.
I mentioned this to her and she had no recollection of it, but I was like, "No,
Really?
this was a
Oh,
real thing. It was only I can't believe it's not butter." But
oh,
yeah, so no,
my
she now
dad was
eats.
into that too. That I can't believe it's not butter. Yep, that's all we ate in our
That's
house.
all we ate, and it's interesting to me, especially looking at my family in the greater theme of our country. My mom's mom was from France. She cooked, so and my
Yeah.
grandfather cooked too. So they were raised on real food that
Butter.
tasted
Yes.
delicious and butter, lots of cheese. And my mom, bless her, she worked full time. I don't know how she did it, to be honest. She worked full time at a very demanding job at a hospital, and she would come home and cook most evenings. And at a certain point in my childhood, it transitioned to TV dinners that were
Mm,
microwaved in plastic. And I say that with zero criticism because I still don't know how she did it, but there just wasn't an understanding that that was problematic. I'm sure
yes.
those TV dinners had all sorts of health claims on them.
Oh, probably. They're like lean cuisine or whatever,
That's
right?
right.
They were supposed to be so healthy for us. Oh, oh my goodness. It's so crazy to me, like what we've been indoctrinated into and all of these things that like still stick with us. And I see it now with like with my clients, right? That even now, 30 years later, even though it's all been debunked and demystified, and yet it's like those old habits are and old paradigms are still so, so strong. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, the way I usually think about it, I mean, I was fortunate enough to live in the UK for nearly 10 years, and you just see different, I don't know, different culture, different attitudes. But, comparatively, British culture has some similarities with American culture compared to other countries in the world. But the way I see it is that here we're like fourth generation confused about what to eat. Right. So it's like
that's a
the
great way of putting
layers.
it.
Yeah, it's so, like, but someone my age growing up in the UK, they may have grown up having a Sunday roast dinner, for example. So they know what that looks like. Whereas I was born in the early 80s. I don't think I knew what a sausage really was,
Yeah.
just these like square things or whatever. So people, it's really, there's an important component about tradition and the loss of tradition. But yes, when it's like third or fourth generation, if you don't even know what food is, then there's a lot of like, education and re-education to do for us all
Yes.
culturally.
Yes, so much so. And you think about like even just it goes back to the marketing on the food, right? Like you think people think they're making healthy choices because they're buying smart pop and because it
Yeah.
says smart it's or skinny pop, right? Like, oh, this is skinny, this is healthy, this is low cal. And oh, I know we could talk about this for half an hour, but I don't want to
Don't
talk
get me
about that.
started.
I want to talk about the nervous system. So
Sure.
let's just kind of start with like the basics of what's the deal with the nervous system, what is the vagus nerve, why is it such a big deal, especially when it comes to chronic illness and all the research that you've been doing.
Yeah, sure. The nervous system is fascinating, and I'm kind of amazed at this point that I was able to go so far into my education and career without kind of learning anything about it. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. Very few people, including clinicians and educators, know much about the nervous system. And those who do tend to be at a level of detail where they can't explain it very well and they can use it sort of in very specific clinical contexts. So maybe they know how to treat like a brain tumor or someone with Parkinson's, but there is very little applicability for you and me and just people who have brains and bodies and may or may not be trying to lose weight. But the nervous system is very cool and it's worth learning about. So there's a few angles. One is that the nervous system is like a tree. Actually, our all living things are like trees. And so our body, we grow and develop from the bottom up, and then it comes forward. And so part of what I discovered is that a lot of people who have health issues, um, which may or may, they may have diseases or they may have symptoms or they may have weight issues or energy issues, which actually a lot of weight issues are tied to energy issues. That a lot of that, not always, but sometimes actually started in development. So it started early on, things were a little bit off course, and maybe they didn't show up as issues right away, or maybe they did. There's different trajectories, but then at a certain point, things kind of go wrong. And we maybe, if we're having digestive issues, we look for solutions there. If we're having, mental health issues like anxiety or depression or attention issues or memory issues, then we might look there. If we're having inflammation, we're looking over here. But most people are not yet aware, and I want way more people to be aware that nervous system development can play a role, and that you can do something about it even if you're an adult. But it's often the thread that ties things together, and it's just extremely overlooked. It's extremely
Hmm.
overlooked.
Yeah. So when you talk about development, are you talking about like in utero development or like all the way from childhood development? Or what does that mean?
Yeah, but great question. So both. So it's if we kind of tell if you tell the story of your life, and I understand as well, not everyone knows about what their mom's experience was of being pregnant with them. A lot of that depends on the generation you were born, not entirely,
Mhm.
but I've asked patients, they're like, we didn't talk about things like that, or what was your birth like? Like we didn't talk about things like
Yeah.
that, but
No
you know,
birthing plans. No,
yeah,
in the
exactly.
70s.
Or yeah, that's right. It was just you could have just came home with the baby, Um, so some people don't know, but and that's fine. But when you look at the story of your life, you look at what you know about what was going on for your parents and your mom around the time you were conceived, and during that gestation, what the delivery was like, and then early childhood, and then we kind of can put threads together. So, for example, actually, I'll back up and explain a little more specifics, and then I'll tie it back to my story because I'm familiar with it. So, when we are born, when we're developing in utero and we're born, um, we aren't able to make conscious movements, right? So everything's set up so that we can survive, and that we can have this long developmental period, right? Like humans are nuts. Like we're not adults until like we're 25, which is not usual for most animals. And so we are able to do these movements, and these are reflexes that come from the brainstem, which is the most bottom part of our brain, and is concerned with survival things like your heart beating and breathing and things like that. And it also lets you do these baby movements, like turning your head to feed at mom's breast, or to roll over a little bit, or to, if you get startled, to alert for help. And so these reflexes help us navigate the first few months. They actually play a role in the birthing process, which is pretty interesting. And then as the months move on and we are moving and we're feeling sensations and we're developing, then the brain grows on top of it, on top of these the brainstem, and comes down and inhibits them. Right. So, like a tree, the crown is growing and then it's coming down and giving shade below. And so these reflexes, which are very helpful, should be inhibited and integrated by the time we're like 6 months to 1 year old. So they should no longer be there. And so what is increasingly commonly kind of found or acknowledged is that that doesn't always proceed as it should. And so many people still have retained primitive reflexes that are both like an objective sign that something is not quite right with your nervous system. So if it's because the brain didn't develop in a balanced way in the first place, then is telling us that. There are other reasons why they can be present. So maybe you have a head injury, and so that crown part is not inhibiting anymore. Neurodegeneration can do it. I would say unhealthy aging. It's the literature considers it a norm, like a normal sign of aging, only because it's so common. But to me, it's just an objective sign that your brain's shrinking, and I think we can aim higher than that being normal. That's just me. And so when those reflexes are there, they're creating noise in the system because, for example, one of them fires when you turn your head, but that's only supposed to happen when you're like, from when you're born to when you're 4 months old. So that's still happening when you're an adult. It's really hard to have a healthy neck and a healthy shoulder, and it's creating interference. But it's also telling you that the higher levels of the brain that we associate with adulting aren't working optimally. And so, yeah, so this is really key. But downstream of all that talk about, primitive reflexes can be things like inflammatory disorders, or dysautonomias, like people having a racing heart when they stand up, or postural hypotension when their blood pressure goes down when they stand up, or attention issues, or emotion issues, or even immune issues. So there isn't really any system that is not downstream of your nervous system. And I'm not saying that this is everyone's problem, but I am saying it's very overlooked, and that I think everyone should be screened for it, like as part of a normal healthy workup. If we're doing health checks, what else are we doing? Making sure that
Yeah.
this is working well.
So you're saying, let me make sure that I understood all of this. that whatever was happening in our development, whatever needed to happen to start to calm down those reflexes so they don't happen anymore, like at age 6 months to a year, but some of those reflexes are still happening, and that has the trickle down effect that it's affecting our health as an adult. Is that
That's
right?
exactly right. It's both a cause and an effect. It's both
Yes.
a sign and a problem.
Huh. That's crazy that I've never heard anything like this before. So
Yeah,
like no, nobody talks about this. So what does that actually mean then? Like, what do you like, number one, how do you know that could be a factor? And what is the effect that it's happening? That's number two, is what is the effect that it's having on you? And then number three, what do you do about it?
awesome. So how do you know it's impacting you? I mean, the most direct way is to get it assessed. Now, this is like a less than 10-minute exam. It's non-invasive, it's not rocket science. In my online program, which is mainly just about complex chronic health, I teach people to have their spouses like or friends do it on them, and then record it. So even though
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to suggest that that replaces going to some sort of center of excellence, it's so much better than nothing, and it can be life changing. So that's how you would directly assess for it. But what might give you some indications that this was going on? The most common pattern is that we have two sides to our brains, and a left and a right, and they're almost like two brains, like we have two eyes, and we have two legs, and it's really like two brains, and they really make different contributions to what we're doing. And so what we see, and increasingly common now, but also if you're an adult, is that one side of the brain develops faster than it really should, and the other side develops more slowly. And that leads to something that's called functional disconnection syndrome. What that means is that you don't have like a lesion or an objective finding that something's wrong in your brain. You don't have like a brain tumor, or you don't have anything like that. It's all there, but it's not talking well together, right?
Hmm.
And so it's like a hint that you might have some of this going on is, let's say as a child, you found you were gifted in certain subjects or gifted in certain things, and that you were behind in other ones. So for example, if someone's left hemisphere of their brain is developing faster than their peers, and they're going to be, uh, you know, gifted at math, and they might start talking or reading early. That's a common one. But your sense of your own body, your interoception, is mainly housed in the right hemisphere. So they might be clumsy, they might not dress appropriately for the weather, things like that. A lot of our emotional intelligence is over here at the top of the front of our right brain. So low
Yes.
emotional intelligence. And also we have different types of attention. And when we like deep dive and go down rabbit holes, that's kind of a left-sided focus attention. But all the other types of attention, including deciding what to pay attention to, lives in the right hemisphere. So now we're describing like a big and growing group of people who may have labels like ADHD and autism, or Asperger's, although I know that term is becoming less popular as Mr. Asperger is getting canceled. But it's just this type of whether or not he should be, but this type of pattern, and then the right hemisphere dominant pattern is associated with dyslexia, although sometimes we get different patterns of that. It's associated with that more sort of absent type of attention, like kind of looking out the window. It may be associated with giftedness in certain musical abilities, certain creative endeavors, and also it can just be a slower processing speed. And one thing that comes up when I talk about this is that there was this whole discussion about the left and right hemisphere that became as we became more aware of it. And then there was this like silly pop sci article that was written about it in the 1970s that really kind of butchered the whole idea. And so it fell out of popularity, but it is very true and real. So I'm not saying that there's like two types of people, and it's not like male and female, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but we don't
Yeah.
want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It is very well established that the left hemisphere and right hemisphere of the brain and the different parts really do things differently.
Yes.
So this is how you might know if you're like, oh, you're like
Yeah.
50 and you're getting diagnosed with ADHD, and now you're saying my whole life makes sense. Well, then maybe you might
Yeah.
think maybe I should get my retained primitive reflexes assessed.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, even as you were describing that, I was like thinking about one of my kids, and I was like, oh, I can see where she's like very gifted in one area. And then like all the stuff that you were describing, I'm like, she must be left brain dominant. But if so, why does that happen then? Like, why does that develop differently if it's not supposed to?
Yeah, great question. So there's layers to this, right? So one is that there are just normal, healthy familial traits. So no problem, no functional disconnection, no diagnosis. That some families, have certain things going on, and they pass them down, and they're adaptive, right? And then we can overlay these tendencies with the kind of like toxic chemical soup and the non-native EMFs, and the kind of over interventionists of industrialized medicine, different practices that happen in early childhood, especially in the United States, but other countries, I don't think we could do too much more to impair healthy childhood development. You can do it. There's a lot of ways to break the complex system. So you can,
Yeah.
have a small child, looking at a screen too much. You can have, an unhealthy outdoor environment, not getting enough healthy sun, light exposure. So a lot of these things can happen. There's a really great explanation that I was given by my mentor, Dr. Robert Melillo. And he said, if you want to breed for like award-winning fast racehorses, then you want to breed for long, skinny legs, right? So that's the trait that you are breeding for, and it's adaptive and it's going to win. But if you take that too far, then you get broken legs.
Mm.
Right. So with the left brain dominance, we see the highest rates of autism in our technological centers like Silicon Valley or the equivalent in the Netherlands. They did a study. So where you have like nerdy programmers having children together, then you're going to see a lot
Mm.
of autism and ADHD.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Huh. So then what, like, if you do determine this, right? Like you start to recognize, you're listening to this, you're like, "Ooh, I recognize some of those symptoms." Like, what is the solution for that? Are you saying like is it reversible? Like once your nervous system is set, is it set forever, or what do you do?
Yeah, what do you do about it? Yeah, so I only look for problems that are solvable. So I'm like not ever going to assess for anything that we can't do anything about, right? So in this case, I used to say this more from like a psychological perspective, but it's never too late to have a happy childhood, and it's never too late to finish your infantile development. Um, so if you find that you have retained primitive reflexes, there's a number of ways to integrate them. The first, and this is getting a little bit specific, but I'm really happy to share with your audience. The first is that by stimulating them, and that's how we were supposed to integrate them in the first place. That when we stimulate the reflexes, it fires up into the brain and it causes the level above to develop. Just like when if you lift weights in your arm, it causes the muscle to develop. So we integrate it by using it. But often, if someone also has this unevenness of their hemispheres, because the other thing to understand is that one of the main functions of the left hemisphere is actually to inhibit the right, and one of the main functions of the right hemisphere is to inhibit the left. There's this balance that happens. So when you get one side that's developed faster than the other, then you kind of get this little double whammy. And then the stronger hemisphere starts trying to do everything, even the stuff that's not wouldn't be as good at as its friend, right? So we want to do stimulation really and different approaches that would help to balance that out. So we can use kind of devices for that. We can exercise in a certain way for that. And then I guess the third thing that I would mention is that many, if not most, of the people who fit into this category usually have stuff going on with their health. So they might have an autoimmune condition, they might have chronic fatigue, they might have chronic infections. The right hemisphere calms down the immune system, the left hemisphere ramps it up. So if we're right hemisphere dominant, we might be like more prone to suffer chronic infections that we can't kick. So this person coming in with chronic fatigue and chronic Lyme and dyslexia, I'm like, okay, we need to look at your neurodevelopment. So the point is that we can change our brain. That's called neuroplasticity, but it's not magic. So it's helpful if we uh, understand enough about how our system works so we can get it to work well. So the first point is that if you have chronic infections or mold or you're full of environmental toxins, your brain's not going to be in a super plastic state.
Mm.
Because when you're asking the brain to change, you need to overcome its bias, which is to say that however terrible you might feel, you are alive. And so the brain is happy to continue doing what it's doing, even if
Yeah.
it's not like optimized for a vital life, because you have survived. And so you need to overcome that tendency so that it feels safe enough to change. So we start off, first helping support to clear immune triggers. Then we focus in on the gut. And then when we look at the brain and the nervous system in stage three of, the step-by-step approach, it's much more
Interesting.
happy to play along.
Interesting. So it's like a multifaceted process then.
Oh,
And
yes.
because I was curious about that, right? Like, as we obviously on this podcast, we talk a lot about the food and the toxins and all of that kind of stuff. And I was curious about how that all plays together, but it certainly does. Like the if you're having to kind of take those multi steps.
Yeah, and I think what I would add is that our if you the defaults of our society kind of gear us towards being unhealthy, right? And so people, yeah, so if you're kind of just following along with the culture, which is normal, then at a certain point you might start to realize that things aren't quite right. And so people might fall into roughly two categories. One, who I feel like you maybe speak to more, are people who are just kind of like on the standard American diet, and that they realize that that is not food, and they shift and their whole life changes, which sounds like kind of your story, that the weight comes off. You no longer need to diet. You just need to eat like human food because you're a human. Your energy's better, your brain works better, and all of that. So that's kind of one sort of rough trajectory. The other is that you do that and you might find some improvements, but you're still sick. So,
Mm,
so making those changes is necessary, but sometimes not sufficient to to bring this complex system that may have crashed in a number of ways back to optimal health. So
mm.
if someone's listening and they have made those changes and they are eating real food, and they might have, I'm guessing most people would feel some improvements, but if things are still not working, then what I've found is that people really need a structured order and a step-by-step approach where they can um, be very strategic and interpret their feedback so that they know what to do next.
So how does that work then? Like when you're like, okay, I've tried all these things and now I need a more step by step approach. What does that actually look like?
Yeah, I mean, so I can tell you in the case of the work that I do. I mean, for
Yeah.
yeah, for many years, I treated one-to-one. I did acupuncture, and I also did a second master's degree in functional medicine and nutrition. So I was doing a lot of lab testing, a lot of supplement-based nutrition. I was able to get some benefits with patients, but really it was not working as well as I wanted to. And so that combined with my own health issues was when I started to retrain and really really want to understand the first principles of how people work. And so I now do a lot less lab testing. And when I do, we hold it at arm's length, just to guide our progress. And I've learned a lot more about the nervous system, and using a lot more botanicals and herbs, which is what we've actually co-evolved with rather than single nutrients. And
Interesting.
so when I work with people, it's actually in a group setting. I see people all over the world, and it's really, guiding people through this step-by-step process. So I currently do that over at Synthesis Health Lab. It's free to apply to join as a guest, and that allows you to be in the group with members and see, to celebrate wins in real time and help see how I troubleshoot in real time, because making setbacks are inevitable when you're recovering from complex chronic illness. There's a lot
Mm.
of resources there just about this way of thinking, which is actually quite different than most people have. And then after that period, if it feels like something that you want to move forward with, then we have an annual membership with that group support.
Interesting. Interesting. And what are some of the chronic illnesses that you've helped people
Sure.
work
I'm
through?
I'm I'm very happy to answer that transparently. I'll also say that I don't treat diseases. This is
Yeah.
for educational purposes only. We're all
All the
adults,
disclaimers.
all the disclaimers. Yeah. So I help people with their health, but sometimes that when they're starting, they report that they have chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, autoimmunity, Lyme, mold, um, uh, post long COVID vaccine injury. People maybe have had a history of cancer and it's in remission, so that's usually in the past. But that's actually so far always in the past. Um, and I mean, those are the main ones, just the kind of chronic
Mhm.
inflammatory things that people get really stuck with. And most of the people I see have been around the block quite a few times with this. So mainly people come, I would say people have been sick for a couple years up to decades before they come in.
Wow.
And it's just really just it's just such a wonderful environment and community. It's very positive. It's very real. People come with their
Yeah.
stuff, but it's by working in the right order, which is basically the kind of order that that our biology is kind of adapted to. People are able to make progress where they had tried really intelligent things in the past and they weren't able to get it to work for
Yeah.
them.
That's amazing. I don't know if you watched it when RFK got signed in or sworn in the Oval Office a couple months ago, and he said, "What did he say? Something about there's millions of Americans have a dream, but 60% of Americans who don't feel healthy, they only have one dream."
Exactly.
And like that has just stuck with me ever since I heard him say that, because it really is so true. Like when you don't feel good, there's only one thing that you want is to feel good. And it impacts everything else that you do. And it just like the just to hear you talk about like the hope that that must give for people to finally have a solution of just being able to feel good after feeling crappy for so long. It's there's nothing else like that. Like it's such an amazing gift.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel so fortunate at this stage of my life for so many reasons. I think, you know, on the parallel threads of my own health journey, where, 8 years ago, my brain wasn't hardly functioning at all, and I really was really, really struggling. And then that gets compounded, I have a 6-year-old daughter, and basically I was able to function well enough to keep her alive, but my system was always telling me to sit down. And so and it's heartbreaking and it's so frustrating because I know that at every moment I was doing the best that I could, but that was always the minimum. And the I don't know. I think the kind of the anxiety and the attachment issues that creates, it's frustrating because I'm kind of educated that I know that, and yet I couldn't do anything about it at the time. And so at this point, I'm always just trying to keep getting stronger and faster so that I'm faster than her, and also be able to model energy and have something extra to give so that I can come to her and say, hey, let's do this thing, rather than let's keep you entertained and enriched enough so that I can sit down until I can, collapse. But also, I've always just sought the best teachers I could find, the best knowledge I could find, and my early education, gave me a great foundation. But ultimately, I was frustrated with the kind of reliability or consistency of the results that I could get.
Mhm.
And now I just feel so fortunate that really, if the person is, I would just say, self-responsible and emotionally mature enough to be guided through a process where they're looking to be guided rather than me to fix them because I can't, no one can. Then I really, do take people in who have all sorts of, scary sounding things or have had problems for a long time, and I'm just, thrilled and humbled and blessed that I see them getting better, and it's really,
Make
really cool.
progress. It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. So what do you think of our current model of medicine? Even I like even functional medicine, right? Like which I think is obviously better than just the traditional path, but I feel like it's still failing a lot of people, especially with chronic illness. What do you
Yeah.
think
So
needs to change on a larger scale?
oh boy. Yeah. So I mean, I talk a lot about functional medicine, and that's because I went so deep into it. Okay. I mentioned that my mom was a doctor, but her father was a chemist, and his brother was a chemist. So I really loved, I had this sort of like illusion that I was like Dr. House, and I could run these labs. And, we, humans have a need for certainty, and that reduces our fear and our anxiety. And so labs provide that certainty. But unfortunately, I found after really, really deep diving that it's a false certainty and that there's no there. And I want to be respectful to my functional medicine colleagues. I still use some of it, but what I would say is that it's an improvement on industrial medicine
Mhm.
in many ways, but it has its own challenges and weaknesses. So one is that um, I think it's because it's coming from industrial medicine. A lot of different types of clinicians can practice functional medicine. So there isn't one functional medicine practitioner, but I have a master's in it and I've done a lot of like year-long mentorship. So I feel like I'm kind of familiar with the standard models, and the standard models don't really involve much bedside examination. So they're not
Mhm.
being taught how to use their eyes and ears at baseline to help with the case. And so there's a lot of, I would say, often lip service pay to this is patient centered and we're just using the labs to support. What that in practice often looks like, it's very hard not to focus in on the labs, and they tend to
Mm,
trump. But also, it doesn't come with a skill set that really allows you to effectively navigate the cases without the lab. So what you end up with is a very long and expensive feedback cycle of whether or not you're going the right direction. So if
mm,
you if someone with complex chronic illness comes to see me, I run between $500 and $2,000 worth of labs. And then I've got like my kind of sheets of certainty and my biochemical education. And now I can tell them, well, you need vitamin A and you need this and you need that and you need your homocysteine's high and all, this is your SNPs, blah, blah, blah. Now, if they immediately start feeling better, then everyone's happy. That does not happen most of the time. And so, because otherwise they would have been in the category of people who could change their diet and feel amazing, and they wouldn't have needed all
right,
those labs, right? Um,
right.
and so then if they're not feeling better, now how do you navigate? And what I commonly see, the standard is, yeah, you just haven't given it long enough. Because we know we're doing the
Mm,
right thing because of the labs. So, we saw that your thyroid was messed up and here's your thyroid support. And, if you're not feeling well, maybe you're not gluten free enough, or like maybe you still need to manage your home stress. And it's this really, yeah, like kind of, I would say fragile model, unfortunately.
mhm,
And it's the best that most people know of.
mhm.
And so, and I had a lot of, I would say, because of the certainty it gives you in the kind of the chops you get for knowing the biochemistry, I had a lot of arrogance about it, in my own mind. And when I went back and said, this is not working, I was able to find excellent teachers in what I would call like a pragmatic approach to Chinese medicine. And it unlocked things because then I learned how to use my eyes and ears and was able to use tools that could help people get feedback within days and not months. And
Mm,
really
that's pretty
often,
huge.
often for free. And also, I'm teaching them how to do it rather than me being the expert in the labs. And it's and the we use kind of everything. We use nutrition. We use circadian, things that people have heard of, right? We're using
Yeah.
them in a strategic way, but I'm, mainly using botanicals and herbs instead of supplements, and they are so sophisticated. And that you can do things with those that you really, I would say, I can't do with supplements. And so there's maybe just a cultural barrier
Mm,
that a lot of people who are coming to functional medicine are not. They're just not aware. They don't know what they don't know. And then a lot of people who have studied Chinese medicine, perhaps in a way that's not pragmatic and is a little bit confused, they're having trouble getting it to work for them, and so then they're being attracted to functional medicine because of the kind of higher perceived value. And so what I really want to bring it back to is if we can relearn how to see things with our eyes and how to understand the basics of how things work, which is really traditional knowledge that most people had for a very long time before we were told that it was superstitious and pre-scientific and stupid. Then we can really make great headway, and we can use things like labs if we need to. It just
to
if it's
supplement.
helpful. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like it's more of a process of like learning how to listen to your body and teaching people how to listen to your body.
it's a process of learning how to listen to your body with a little bit more guidance than sometimes comes behind that
Yeah.
phrase.
Yeah. I love that. So, final thoughts. What like last word of advice if you could teach women one thing about listening to their bodies, especially through the lens of the nervous system, what would you want them to know and first and foremost?
Oh gosh, that's that's a really great question. I I like the movement towards just kind of checking in, becoming aware, becoming centered, the practices that help support that. Um, if you are someone who has tried those things, and again you're like, okay, I'm listening and I feel anxious, or I'm trying to meditate and it's not happening, then it's not your fault. And sometimes it really is just certain missing distinctions that once you see them, they change everything. So often, your listeners, like you, whoever is listening to this, you are smart, and so often if you're not getting things to work for you, it's because most advice is good advice. It's about when it's helpful, right? And so
Yeah, that's
learning how
great.
to learning how to make those distinctions will help you make these things work for you, by going in the
Nice.
right order and by making those distinctions. Yeah.
I love that. So smart. Well, Mel, this was so informative and so helpful, and I'm sure anyone who is struggling with chronic illness or just been doing all the things and looking for more help would love to know how to follow up with you. So let us know where we can find you, and of course, we will add all of that to the show notes as well.
Sure. So if you come over to synthesishealth.co, you will find the place to apply to be a free guest in the group. I read all of the applications, and if you're clinically a good fit for the group, and also we just screen to make sure everyone's like kind of are nice humans, um, right?
Very important.
Yeah, it's like a really awesome part of
So be
this.
nice.
Be nice, and then I know you will be, then you can come in and you can see what it's all about. You can, look over my shoulder. You can see what the community's like. You can ask me any questions that you have, which is cool. And then you can, if you want to go forward, you can. I also have a blog where sometimes I'll like kind of get pent up enough to go on a rant and write, and so that's over at essays.synthesishealth.co.
Okay. And we will make sure again to link to all of that in the show notes. And Mel, thank you so much for joining us today. This was awesome.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, that about does it for this episode. Remember that you will find the link to Mel's website along with her resources and everything else that we talked about in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. And if you know anyone else who's been struggling with chronic illness or burnout, please send this episode their way. It could be the thing that finally helps them start to heal. Then, of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast to be notified of future episodes. And I will see you back here for another new episode very soon.